follow-up meeting, we have the gentleman from Ohio. Bob Fitrakis is a professor in Ohio, and he is an activist and a lawyer who's been pushing very hard for legal actions and who's worked really hard on exposing fraud in Ohio. And we're very lucky to have him as part of our community. So Bob, take it away.
All right. I think the topic was hidden threats, and I know Victoria mentioned I should probably do something on the strange 2012 behavior of Karl Rove, the meltdown, which actually Jim and Mary Beth did a nice piece. They were in town on election night. But again, let me just briefly take you. There were 3 stories that we did at the Free Press in 2012 that really went viral. The first one, which in fact 2 of them were called the 5 October surprises, and the only 2 that were verified as true by Banking Insider, which attempted to rip these election stories apart, but they actually took a look at them and said, we're in trouble here. Some of you may or may not know, but Forbes magazine, about 26 minutes into Election Day, issued a huge Forbes.com front page story on the election being under threat in Ohio. Wow. Essentially, we moved Wall Street. Now, I really think they realized that essentially stealing elections is not good for the stock market, and by God, to some extent Obama was, is that you can't really destroy the foundation of democracy and expect this country in any way to stay economically viable. The biggest problem we actually had selling what was going on in Ohio tended to be with groups friendly to the mainstream Democratic Party. We were attacked by Alternate and Think Progress and those groups, right? What the Republicans do is they simply say we're crazy. Those people are crazy. But the people who actually intellectually fight us. And the great irony of all this is that at the same time, I'm getting most of this information from the Democrats. Yeah. They're leaking me the information and publicly attacking me. In 2008, the Obama administration, they had an attorney from New York, Joe Perreno, who was running their Newark office in Ohio, the key important state. That's the key swing state. Suddenly he shows up and says they're real concerned about what you're saying, that 1.1 million people have been thrown off the voting rolls. Can you show me? So we showed him the paperwork through public request, which apparently they forgot to ask for. Moves into my house and stays there for 2 months. And on the other hand, they're personally saying that, oh, Fitrakis, he's crazy, he doesn't know what he's talking about. So publicly they're saying one thing. On the other hand, they're scared to death as to what is actually going on. And then they'll say, well, look, we can't say anything. It'll panic our people. If we say this stuff is really going on, no one's going to show up. And other Democratic operatives actually say you got to think of it as a gentleman's handicap. Is, we have to win by double digits. And I'm thinking, well, that's not the way democracy should be. And it was the Carlyle group. So it's
which is the Bushes.
Bush family. Here you have this apparatus, and while we're looking at them closer, they're going, and this was just a great revelation, is that on one hand they're going, well, this is going to be zero-based knowledge. It's going to work fine. You're going to vote. We're not going to know anything about how you voted, right? And then it turns out they bought Carrier IQ. Carrier IQ is, you may have known it, Carnivore, owned by the FBI. They own that software, their company. That's the one that the NSA was using with Booz Allen Hamilton, Edward Snowden. Every keystroke on your computer, they could turn it on to video you and listen to you. So the people who promised you internet voting because it would be zero-based knowledge. Know every gun, have the same technology to know every keystroke and everything you've ever said. So they can come up with, in Ohio we used to say, you never know who's won Ohio until the cyber vote comes in. They can actually manufacture they don't need the 04 like, damn, we voted 131 people in Clyde. They can now come up with a plausible people from listening, right? Because that's what they're doing in prison with their software. They're using natural analytics and where you're located to vote you. So they can tell with your language if you're an independent and which way you're leaning. They've read all your mail. So then, of course, we said, look, this is Washington-based. And to tell you the truth, we were looking for George Soros. We had been listening to too much Fox News, who said that Soros owns Seidel, right? So we thought that was a big story, So we would go prove it. And then no, it's not Soros. And they kept referring to it as Spanish-based. Yeah, and it ends up with the exact opposite. And then it's like, well, we're going to count it in the United States, right? We're going to count it at the U.S. headquarters. So we sent Jill Simpson, the one who turned in Karl Rove, for what they did in Alabama with the governor down there.
Don Siegelman.
Don Siegelman. She was one in the room, and Rove comes on the speaker and says, yeah, we can't beat him at the polls, let's indict him. So she goes with Jim March to the headquarters, the U.S. headquarters. It's a house. It's a house in the suburbs of Glen Allen, Virginia, in spook CIA territory. So, we take pictures of the house and post them, and then the very next day they move to one of those rental offices in Baltimore. And we're thinking, what is going on here? These are the people counting millions of overseas votes and want direct access to the boards of election in dozens of states. Thankfully, Ohio needed an actual ballot from overseas. It was one of the few laws in Ohio that were actually decent. So that happened. The next thing that happened, you may recall, we found out that Bain Company executives had bought up Hart InterCivic. And again, we got pushback from the liberal community on this. But, and a lot of it was, well, they were Bain Company, they now own Hart InterCivic, as we looked at that, and that the original capital money had come from the Romney family, the original $10 million, and they were investor with the company that had bought up the Hart InterCivic, right? And it was like, well, how do we know they invested in that particular fund? It's like, they put up the initial capital. and then on the other hand, they'll say, well, they're just trying to make money. I'm going, well, why would they buy Hart InterCivic? There's 12 areas in study after study, including the Everett study in Ohio. There's 12 areas of computer security. Hart was the only one that failed all 12. That a single change in a card could infect the entire voting process. And that's exactly why they bought it. Of course, it was the best. Depends on the criteria. But they were counting Cincinnati. And that story pretty much went viral. And the last one we've already talked about was the computer. The computer patch is that, okay, the Hart InterCivic's been exposed. So now, and the only reason we know about this because a Republican in the Secretary of State's office thought it was wrong, and actually somebody appointed to the commission to oversee the voting machines calls us up, and they keep telling me this is okay, and they've got legal justification. Lawyers keep talking to me, but it just doesn't seem right. No one's looked on it, and it hasn't been certified. And they're putting it on 39 machines only in Democratic areas.
Tabulators, central tabulators.
The county central tabulator.
Cash.
And I'm thinking, that's impossible, You got any proof? And she said, here's the contract. So I was like, oh my God. It's like, they're getting paid to do custom coding. And that's why I would argue is that Karl Rove was expecting different results on election night, right? If you watch that, right, Karl Rove just kept saying, wait a minute, these numbers in Ohio, and you know, he's making up numbers. It's much closer than it looks. They're showing 50, 90,000 vote leads by Obama. And all the outlying areas are in places like Cleveland, where they put the patch, and Akron, where they put the patch, and Franklin County, where they put the patch. And he kept saying, wait. And remember, he made them go down and talk to the people that were doing the exit polls, and they're going, no, we're not seeing the number. Now, here's the odd thing, if you ever look at it, because he specifically mentioned counties. It's like, well, you know, the vote's not in Delaware County. Wow. Oh, you mean the one that went 136 straight votes for Bush? And if you worry about the media here, I brought this up with the New York Times. I'm saying, look, it's not possible. And they're going, well, it could have just been a couple of busloads of people. And I said, that doesn't make any sense. First of all, there's 44 seats on a bus. The last time I counted, that'd be more than a couple busloads to 336 votes. And two, David Koresh is dead. They're all voting in the exact same precinct. I mean, unless it's Ranch Armageddon in some large cult, the odds of them all being in the same precinct. And they're like, well, it makes sense to us. Some buses showed up. It's like, do you have any proof that suddenly, 12 buses showed up from some obscure cult and they all voted exactly? But your story doesn't need to be plausible to fool the mainstream media, right? Which will let me get into some positive stuff in this case. Some of the things that we've done that have proved successful. Number one, observers in Ohio. After the 2004 election, when the recount had to be done by the Libertarians and the Greens, and I was thinking, this is awful, right? I sued and got the Green Party on the ballot. Thankfully, it wasn't that difficult because I won that one fairly easily for Cynthia McKennick, because shockingly, the law in Ohio on third parties was declared unconstitutional by the Sixth Circuit Court, but it did not stop Kenneth Blackwell from promulgating administrative rules on an illegal law. So I went to court, and your first day in law school, in administrative law or legislative law, you realize that you cannot essentially establish rules on unconstitutional laws. You need a new law. So hence, the Green Party got on the ballot, as did all the minor parties, because there was no law and it was unconstitutional restricting it. So we got it on the ballot, but the Green Party then gets observers. So in the state of Ohio, in every single precinct, the Green Party listed observers. Now, 90% of them were progressive Democrats, because there's not enough Green Party people in Ohio. So it was a coalition of independent progressives, libertarians, progressive Democrats that have been swayed by Mimi and others that election integrity is important. So we train those people, but we train our observers. Observers are supposed to go there, and I'm an international observer. I wrote the co-report on the first election in El Salvador, where they counted on paper only. That's the only thing the guerrillas, the death squads, and the guerrillas could agree on. We're counting on paper, and we're holding this stuff up in front of each other. Okay. So, plenty of guns. So,
guns and paper. That's a new band formed by the election integrity movement. Water guns.
So we ended up in that case. Our observers are more aggressive. We've actually taught them to speak up. I was an observer in Franklin Park, and we also, even though it's not legal, we send video cameras with it. Michael Moore came in and started video the vote, which is the only reason all those videos you've seen with the footage, all of that comes from Free Press people with cameras provided by Michael Moore. Wow. And a little story I always like to tell people is I was a lawyer with the NAACP, the Broad Election Coalition. I had a nice jacket, like one of those windbreaker kind of with little words on it. And I realized is that no one would listen to me. I would go in and say, that's illegal. You can't do that. It's like, who cares? Who the hell are you? But I did, when there were 7-hour lines in 2004 and people are standing in a cold rain, I'd go to the Capitol, because that's where the press corps is. Of the world, right? And they're all there for the buffet, mainly. And I go in there and go, you need to come with me a mile from here on the Near East Side, in the black neighborhoods. People are being turned away. People are being threatened. There's 7-hour lines. And then, of course, the media followed me. Immediately, Japanese public television leaped up.
Yeah.
So did German public television, Al Jazeera. And there were some American, Rupert Murdoch's London Times, and one stringer from Pacifica. One radio guy, okay. So literally they forced their way into not a single American news station or radio station other than this Pacifica stringer went and covered the story. So almost all of that footage is from volunteers of the Free Press, and were it not there, I mean, they saw it in Japan and Germany. We didn't have any of that footage. If it wasn't for the volunteers, they could have, the big lie would have worked. It's like, which was, there was no real problem. There was a few scattered incidents, because essentially the American media didn't want to get wet and have the story. So the observers, and also the flying squads. We go beyond observers. We put together teams of videographers with attorneys and people willing to take arrests, which generally are anarchists, we know. They're kind of, oh, cool, when am I getting arrested? They always couldn't have as sacrificial lambs. And as some of you may know, anyone here from the Bay Area and worked in the project with Donald Goldbach, is that our computers are monitored in 2008 and in 2012 from the Bay Area, who call us up and tell us all over Ohio when the computers go down in Warren County or at the Secretary of State's office, and they're taking, they were taking frame by frame shots to see if there was strain shifting, which there was in 2004. I mean, David Cobb, who's here and got like 192 votes, at one point they had parked in Cincinnati like 22,000 votes in his column. And I suspect they were carry votes about to be delivered elsewhere. These large block of votes would sit there for a while, and then they would sort of disappear, but the percentage would stay the same, meaning they had been reassigned to whatever the correct place was. So we've had tremendous success, because when Warren County went down in 2008, that's the county that declared the level 10 Homeland Security alert, which, the sheriff, again, I was telling someone at lunch, suggested you don't get a level 10 unless bin Laden's walking down the street with a surface-to-air missile. But thankfully, it was called by the Board of Election without notifying the sheriff, who thought it was real funny. Yeah, level 10, that's what happened. And they diverted all of the ballots to a warehouse under the control of a Republican operative. So you have these flying squads. The other thing we used with great success was the public hearings. 2 days after the election, I'm complaining at a UU church, who, they're very liberal at the UU church. And the old story was from the governor of Michigan, Blanchard, was the last time they mentioned God there is when the janitor fell down the stairs and said, God damn it. So I meant the UU because the UUs will tolerate one maverick on the left, right? Okay, get the one maverick on. And I'm sitting there and I'm telling these things I'm telling you today. And afterwards, this guy walks up to me, and the only thing I remember is he looked like Eugene Victor Debs. I don't know if it was an apparition. He walks up and goes, look, if whatever you're saying is true, you're a lawyer. Why don't you call goddamn public hearings? I'm thinking the second time goddamn's been there. And get a court transcriber. And I'm thinking, I am a lawyer. I can get a court reporter. I can put people under oath. So we did. And Michael Moore helped us with that. So we thought we had 5. But we were thinking maybe we'll get 50 people. was over 500 people. We had to schedule a second one down at the courthouse 2 days later. So literally over 1,000 people showed up, and over 500 gave testimony or affidavit, which we then gave to John Conyers, which was the basis of that. But at the time, we're like feeling like, I was feeling existential, like, Camus, I'm Moro, I'll be there, there'll be 3 people.
Yeah.
We'll be cool. And like people actually showed up
Yeah.
because we weren't making it up. They were in fact disenfranchised. The other thing, the video of the vote, we talked about the writ of mandamus, which is we filed repeatedly. In 2004, we stumbled on the fact, we didn't stumble on it, somebody from Toledo called up and go, why are they purging all these voters in August? They're not allowed to do it in an odd, in a even number year. They got to purge in an odd number year. And I'm thinking, oh, I'll look it up. Yeah, they're right. So 305,000 voters in an even number year, but they were only purged in 3 counties. Lucas County, Toledo, Cleveland, Cuyahoga, Cincinnati. And they weren't purged in the city. They were purged in the inner city and disproportionately in the black wards. And in Cleveland, the corrupt white Democrats who control the suburbs cut a deal with the Republican Party to purge 24.96% of every single voter in Cleveland. And again, these Norm Robbins came up with these numbers and provided them from public records, which we were able to print. So a quarter of all the votes. And when I was talking to Joe Perreno, he said in 2004, I was there and someone comes in and asked Donna Bruce, could this be possible? And she goes, I don't know. She's, running this voter project for the Dems. She goes, but go and find out. So we gave them the paper. But in 2008, they purged 1.25 million, of which, and then here's how it works. We actually in January asked for the purge list ahead of time because they do it the year before, that's odd number. The Democrats get around September, like maybe we should get those lists. At that point, the Board of Elections are running an election, they say, we don't have the time, which is a legitimate excuse, to get you that information. So in both 2004, 2008, and 2012, the Columbus Institute for Contemporary Journalism had the only list, which of course, we made them open to everyone, Democrat, Republican, news media. The only one who asked for them were the Democrats in an 08 Acorn, which actually went door to door to register the people to vote again. So these massive voter, which is why they're no longer around.
Yeah, that's right.
These massive voter purges that are taking place. And remember, Acorn got in trouble. I mean, because under Ohio law, they were in a bad situation. If the people they paid, the local people they hired, made up a false name, you can't assume it's a false name. So if you discard it, you get a first-degree misdemeanor for discarding a public record. If you turn it in, potential fifth-degree felony for essentially voter fraud. Yeah, so it's either way. What they actually did was they told the boards of election, we can't verify and we're worried about this. What they were accused of is what they actually notified the board of. To avoid a first-degree misdemeanor for destroying a public record. I mean, Acorn's great sin was registering poor people to vote. That's why they're no longer in business. But we need to get these things. And the other things, of course, we decided we got a low FM radio station, so we actually are able to get news out before the election because they kept switching the polling places. We used to have a neighborhood polling place. It was a block away from our, and then they closed that down. They moved one next block over, but then they assigned us to one nearly a mile away. So we used to call it the precinct to which you were randomly assigned by Ken Blackwell. And then people would call you up and tell you to go to the closest one. And then Blackwell changes the law and says if you vote out of precinct, your vote for president doesn't count for the first time in history, right? And he's also the guy who said if he found an old law saying that unless it was on 80 bond paper weight, the thick paper, he gave back 10,000 voter registrations.
That were on newspaper print.
Yeah, that because everyone uses 20 because you scan those. That's what Board of Elections do. Nobody uses 80, it jams the scanner. So all those things, we've been successful. Through the radio station, you let people know ahead of time. And we also recruit people that go there and observe outside the poll. So if they run into the white preppies known as True the Vote, who committed fraud in Ohio, they can, essentially ask them why they're there, and they're trained to point out, you can't challenge me, you don't know who I am, who the hell are you? In 2004, and I'll leave in this note, they had people showing up in suits closing down precincts in Cleveland while people had waited in line for 3-4 hours. They were in suits, they had tags on, and when they were challenged, one place said, we've been warned about you, we've heard the radio shows, which we broadcast into Cleveland, and we want to know who in the hell you are. And they ran back to a Mercedes, leaped in, and took off. Hi, we're very important people in suits with a tag that says something.
Wow.
So people can, once they have knowledge, be trained to stand up and fight back. Thanks.